Shabbat Shalom on this final day of December of the secular year 2022. I want to speak to you about the subject of change. We're looking at Parashat Vayigash. Vayigash is Hebrew for "and he drew near" or "then he drew near." This parasha is found in Bereshit 44, verse 18 through 47, verse 27. Vayigash is the third of 4 Torah portions in the Yosef cycle, centered around the life of Yosef and his brothers and their father, Yisrael. In this parasha, after a brief break for Hanukkah, we continue the narrative of Yosef in Egypt. His brothers have been forced to come to Egypt because of the terrible famine in the land of Canaan. They're seeking food for their family, and they don't even recognize in the Egyptian ruler they must bow before, the brother they sold into slavery many years earlier. Their youngest brother, Binyamin, accused of theft, is being held in custody. By the end of Parashat Mechetz, Yosef had risen to a place of prominence in Pharaoh's court. This is due at least in part to his ability, given by God, to correctly interpret Pharaoh's dreams and to prepare the Egyptians for a drought. With a famine in the land of Canaan, Yosef's brothers were forced to make the long trip to Egypt to buy food. There, Yosef recognized them as soon as they entered the royal court, but they didn't know him. There's no doubt that he had been greatly changed by his experiences. Yosef had been powerless to protect himself when his brothers sold him into slavery. Now he had all the power. His brothers literally bowed at his feet, as per his early dream. Is this family doomed to relive a violent past, or will we see that transformation and growth are possible? Parashat Vayigash answers this question. We can change. One of the oldest sons, Yehuda, demonstrates a true shift in character by offering to be imprisoned instead of Benjamin, accused of theft. Yehuda's actions demonstrate that he is now more concerned for his father's emotional well-being and even perhaps for the fate of his younger half-brother than he is for his own security and future. Yosef, meanwhile, has put his brother's betrayal behind him. And in an emotional scene of revelation, he invites his brothers to relocate to Egypt and live prosperous lives under his protection. Yosef also acknowledges that his brother's evil inclination and action has been used by God to the benefit of their family. He says, "You intended evil, but God used it for good." The brothers and their families accept his generosity, and they move everything and everyone to Egypt. Consider these thoughts from our parasha. God has much to say about the human potential for change and maturing growth, for which we should be thankful. Biblical depictions of human events provide understanding and insight which can truly impact our own lives. Parashat Vayigash narrates the story of a dysfunctional family's reunion. We all know about Yosef, sold into slavery by his brothers years earlier, who now reappears as their savior just when the family faces the crisis of famine. Joseph finds himself in a place of power over his brothers, perfectly positioned to take revenge on them for their earlier treatment of him. And in any popular novel, movie, or TV series, that's exactly what he would have done. Joseph may have been tempted, but he's more interested in testing them to find out if they have changed. He does this by insisting that they bring their youngest brother, his full brother, to Egypt, the only other son of Rachel. When Benjamin arrives, Joseph has him framed for stealing a valuable cup. This is the moment of truth. Joseph has his brothers right where he wants them, able to achieve total control over his family's fate. What will he do? Will he take revenge? Will he be merciful? Joseph breaks free of the family's pattern of harmful behavior, telling his brothers who he is and welcoming them to Egypt. What would you have done under similar circumstances? Rather than destroy them, he will become the deliverer of his family, a position God planned for him all those years ago when he dreamed his dreams. The dreams, of course, were intended by God to encourage him to hope even in the darkest moments of his captivity, moments yet to come at that time. Joseph does not ask his brothers to repent. Instead, he redeems the past by putting their actions behind him without recrimination. Which of us could do that? What has happened to Joseph in the intervening years has made it possible for him to be completely transparent with his brothers. He is willing to be reconciled with them because he himself has learned humility as well as God's rachamim, his mercy, and his chesed, his love, or loving kindness. We can also observe the character change in Yehuda as we read Bereshit 44. Here, Yehuda pleads with Joseph, whom he has not yet recognized. He pleads for the life of Benjamin, the favorite son of his father Yaakov, since Joseph was killed. He's no longer arrogant. He is humble and submissive. He's concerned. Is this the same man who actively participated in the brothers' plot to get rid of Joseph? When Yehuda pleads for his brother's freedom, he provides insight into his father's character and concerns as well. He says, "We have an aged father and a young boy of his old age, whose brother is dead. He alone was left of his mother, and so his father loves him all the more." The Hebrew suggests that Yaakov loves only Benjamin, and that Yehuda's acceptance of this state of affairs is at the crux of this drama. Can we see that Joseph's brothers have matured, both in relationship to one another and toward their father? What do you believe about the possibility for lasting change in human behavior? What can we learn about God's intentions from the life of Yosef? We read in Bereshit 50, verse 20, "You thought evil against me, but God intended it for good." These words should bring to mind the biblical principle expounded so fully by Rav Shaul. All things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. All things. Not every little thing that you see in your life, but all things. God's tapestry works. He's putting it together. We have to believe that what he is doing will work for us. Have you ever said to someone, you're going to get what you deserve? I think most of us have said that. We've certainly all thought it. What did Joseph deserve or have the right to expect from his family? That he would be favored by his father? That his brother's mother would not malign him? That his brothers would treat him as they would want to be treated? Whatever Joseph might have expected, his experiences were very different. Did Joseph have the right to expect anything from God? If a righteous God only does good things, why didn't only good things happen to Joseph? We know that God is a just God. Did Joseph receive his just deserts? Did he have the right even to the good things he'd already enjoyed? What about all the other people who lived at the time of Joseph? Did they deserve slavery, misery, early death? When something bad happens to someone, they often say, why me? But why not you? As a person who worshiped the one true God, what Joseph had the right to expect was that God would be at work in his life so that he might become a person of mature character and substance. He did not have the Torah, much less the whole of the scriptures, to guide him and explain this to him. Was it unfair of God to allow terrible things to happen in his life without any apparent explanation? How was the development of his character likely to happen? We have only to look at the example of Job, to know that God acts in ways which human beings do not and cannot understand, with goals that we don't know or perceive. Was goodness worth the cost paid by Joseph in Potiphar's house? How many times along the way might Joseph have said, what has being righteous ever gotten me? Another question we might ask is, what good was accomplished in and through Joseph's life? Joseph's treatment by his brothers was humiliating, frightening, anger-provoking, yet we hear nothing of fear or rage against them. Joseph's experience in prison gained him servanthood, humility, perseverance, persistence. He was taught patience and the ability to endure. He learned to depend upon God in the face of adversity. During his sojourn in prison, Joseph also learned to listen to God, to be tuned in to what God was doing in his life. Joseph, the interpreter of dreams, was finally called before Pharaoh. But this was not the same Joseph who somewhat arrogantly presented his own dreams to his family. Notice the difference in attitude as he unfolds the ramifications of Pharaoh's dream. as compared with the way he explained his youthful dreams to his family. As a result of the ability given him by God to interpret dreams, he was placed in the position of power and authority over all Egypt. This was a tremendous opportunity to get his own back with power over those who had wronged him. Potiphar, his wife. Power over his brothers for good or evil was given into his hands. But God knew that Joseph was ready for this test, as he might not have been in his early years. The pattern of Joseph's mature character is exemplified in the words of Rav Shimon Kifa, who tells us that if we have the qualities in abundance which he describes, we will be fruitful and productive. These qualities, goodness, wisdom, self-control, perseverance, godliness, brotherly affection. Joseph had become a patriarch in his own right, a man of substance and wisdom, a man who understood God's plan and followed them. Because of Joseph's servanthood, his family, the family of Yaakov, became the people of Israel. They not only survived, but flourished. God moved his people to Egypt for his purpose, and he used the famine and Joseph to do it. Who could have imagined all of this when Joseph was a boy in his father's house? What about your goals and choices? Did you know that God's greatest concern for you, as it was for Joseph, is to build your character, not to provide for your temporal enjoyment or pleasure? We read, those whom he knew in advance, he also determined in advance would be conformed to the pattern of his Son, Mashiach Yeshua. This is a statement of God's foreknowledge of all things, not of determinism, as we know that he's not willing that any should perish. As a child of God, it should be your desire to conform to the paradigm of Mashiach Yeshua. But let's face it, for most of us, this takes second place too. Having our own way and doing our own thing. Finding activities that please us. Taking it easy. Getting along and not making waves. Wanting people to like us. Our own expectation of an enjoyable life, or what many people call happiness. Avoiding anything that's difficult or painful. Quitting when life becomes difficult. Taking the path of least resistance. The difficulties, the struggles, the hurts, the sorrows, and the stresses of life, the very things that we seek to avoid, these can produce the greatest growth and maturity in our lives. Therefore, God is not likely to move any of these difficulties out of your way. Although he promises that he'll be with us through everything, never leaving or forsaking us, he will not divert hardship from your doorstep. He promises to provide all of our needs, but this is in accordance with his superior knowledge of those needs and not in keeping with your wish list. God allows each struggle in order to encourage you to become stronger. He allows each sorrow to make you more compassionate. He will use each experience you would like to avoid to create yet another positive character trait in you. Goodness, wisdom, self-control, perseverance, godliness, brotherly affection, and respect. As we look back, in retrospect, we have seen God's dealings with Joseph, the pattern of Joseph's life, and we must acknowledge that the good God was doing could only be seen in retrospect. Looking back over the past years, can you see the good that God has been doing in your life? Can you see the goodness and mercy Melech David wrote about in Tehillim 23? What is God's place in your life? Have you consciously thought about what God wants to see happen in you and through you in 5783 or 2023? Has God's presence been your constant reality? If not, why not? Has God's power been real to you, in you, and even through you to others? Have you spent the last 12 months trying to avoid God's plan for your life? Or can you say that you have sought to know and choose God's purpose in each situation and event? And you've desired to operate within this purpose? Can you look back over 2022 and see what God is seeking to do in your life? Is there a maturing process? Has there been spiritual growth? Are you more useful within His community and for His kingdom, or not? If not, it isn't because God has failed to do His part. But you can change. You see, change is really what it's all about. Not changing and getting to a place where you think that you're okay, but continuing to change. Begin by pursuing God's goals and choices instead of your own, as Rav Shaul encourages us in Philippians 3. Now listen carefully. It's not that I have already reached the goal. That's not what it's about. No, I keep pursuing it in the hope of taking hold of that for which the Messiah Yeshua took hold of me. I, for my part, do not think of myself as having gotten hold of it. I haven't arrived. But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind me and straining forward toward what lies ahead, I keep pursuing the goal in order to win the prize offered by God's upward calling in the Mashiach Yeshua. Many live as enemies of the Mashiach's execution stake. They are headed for destruction. Their God is their appetites. They are proud of what they ought to be ashamed of, since they're concerned about the things of the world. But we are citizens of heaven, and it is from there that we expect a deliverer. He will change the bodies we have in this humble state and make them like His glorious body, using the power which enables Him to bring everything under His control. So, keep standing firm in union with the Lord. Just as surely as God had a specific goal for Joseph, he has a goal for you, which you can reach by making the choices as demonstrated in the lives of those like Joseph, those who are our examples from the scriptures. None of us have yet reached this goal, which means we must continue to pursue it. Learn from and bury the failures and mistakes of 2022 and move forward into the successes that God has planned for you in 2023. Make choices you know will please God in accordance with His Torah commandments and instructions, and stretch forward to grasp the glorious future that lies ahead, because you believe God is active in your life, in our community, and in the world around us. Anticipate personal growth and do everything in your power to nurture new growth. Dedicated prayer and study of the scriptures, along with receiving empowering exhortation on a regular weekly basis. Be enthusiastic about what God will do in you. It will be positive. See wonderful opportunities and challenges rather than problems, and see yourself as an overcomer. Follow the pattern set by those who've gone before us, and avoid wasting time with those who do not continue to follow the truth. Choose holiness and righteousness, and choose to spend time with those who encourage this positive perspective in you. Having done this, go forward each day with anticipation, knowing that God will allow learning and maturing opportunities in your life. In this way, you will expand your horizons and develop the spiritual potential that God has placed within you. Covenant with God, to walk with Him daily, minute by minute, from the moment you arise in the morning until you go to sleep at night. Don't operate according to your own agenda. Commit yourself to daily prayer and study of the scriptures. Live a holy life by following God's express commandments and His plan for your life. He has many mitzvot already prepared for you to do. Affirm God's power in your life, following the pattern that is recommended by Rav Shaul to be life-changing. Philippians 4. Rejoice in union with the Lord always. I say it again. Rejoice. Don't worry about anything. On the contrary, make your requests known to God by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, in the understanding that God always answers prayer. In conclusion, focus your thoughts on what is true and noble and righteous and pure, lovable or admirable, or on some virtue or something praiseworthy. That's where our attention should be focused. On all that is good and righteous and of God. I pray that the new secular year will be a positive year for you. Positive in the sense that God will stretch you forward and help you to become the person He created you to be. God bless you, and may you have a wonderful week and a blessed 2023.